I had realized I had lost the battle, lost the war of trying to fix my loved one's problem with alcohol. So at the end of the day, I ended up being in a church basement on my knees. I was numb, I was full of fear, full of anger, full of resentment. I was just a person that I didn't really recognize anymore.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you for being here and agreeing to talk to me today about your experience. So maybe just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about
My name is Jennifer. I guess I've probably spent the last maybe 10 to 15 years dealing with addiction in my family. I really had a hard time trying to figure out how to manage my life, because very much I found my life was unmanageable dealing with alcoholism and addiction. Anyway, it was suggested I met Mike through a mindful-based stress reduction course, and he suggested I go to Al-Anon, and I've been in Al-Anon for about 3 years, and I've also been...
By now, it's got to be longer than that.
Yeah, so I had a hiatus of about 2 years, but I've been in and out just because our group dismantled our hybrid and I wasn't able to go in person to the group. But I'm back to the group when I can. So it's been about 5 years now. I'm here today really to talk about my journey with Al-Anon, my healing journey with Al-Anon, and what Al-Anon is. And
Right. We should preamble that we are not affiliated with Al-Anon, AA, any 12-step group. This is our experience with these things. And I was trying to, I can imagine, I think we met in the MSc program.
yes.
And I can picture we were sitting on this side of the horseshoe here. Heidi was here. Heidi is the teacher. And I was trying to play the story to my wife this morning about how this conversation, I guess, started. I think it was probably 7 years ago now. No?
At least.
6. Yeah. 7, 8, maybe even. Yeah. And somehow I think we came out of a meditation. We did the group dyad, right? And then somehow it led us to talking about Al-Anon. That experience of being open yourself in a room full of people that are practicing that, and then to be able to share that with somebody and to learn with people was a big part of it, at least for me.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think, a lot of people, like, I have to say, the first time I went to Al-Anon was probably 10 years before I started fully engaged in Al-Anon. And I was in a church basement, and, they have all these slogans. They have the 12 steps, and they have the 12 traditions all written up there, and everything, sort of says God, this and that. And it sort of like turned me off. I wasn't ready for it. And then it
And was
10
that family related, I assume?
it was all family related. And I think at the end, when I finally got the suggestion from you to go, I ended up going, and I found it was a whole different experience for me, that I was in a place where I was basically, I was beaten down. I was, as they say in Al-Anon and AA, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I had realized I had lost the battle, lost the war of trying to fix my loved one's problem with alcohol. And so at the end of the day, I ended up being in a church basement on my knees. I was numb. I was full of fear, full of anger, full of resentment. I was just a person that I didn't really recognize anymore. I had just realized that my life had become unmanageable and that I needed help. And I had to come to the conclusion that actually I was sick. It wasn't the person who had the addiction problem who was sick. I had become sick. I was ill. I was mentally ill. Just realized that my life had become unmanageable and that I needed help. And I had to come to the conclusion that actually I was sick. It wasn't the person who had the addiction problem who was sick. I had become sick. I was ill. I was mentally ill, in a sense that I think there's a great thing about the first step. The first step says that we we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. And that was exactly where I was. I had to admit that I had a problem. And I had to also come to the conclusion that I was completely powerless over alcohol. And in that first step, I was really I realized through going through and we should say, like, Al-Anon is a group. It's not it's affiliated with AA, but it's a completely separate group that is for friends and families of alcoholics. And it's there to provide experience, strength, and hope for members who are really lost with their relationships with loved ones who are dealing with alcoholism and or addiction. And I might want to just stress that today, because cannabis is legal in Canada, that it seems to be a combination of both alcohol and cannabis that I was dealing with in my family. So it was just really really hard. On the first
Yeah.
step, I made a big a learning about what the I call it the cloud of love. What I thought that I did in love for about 10 years was, instead of providing unconditional love, I provided interference. And the other thing that I mixed up and was confused with was the idea of caring. Instead of caring, I was controlling. And so my actions were actually very they were making a bad situation worse in my family. So the one thing about addiction that I think all people learn when they go to Al-Anon, what's so great about the program that helped me heal was that I learned that I contributed to the family disease of alcohol and that I needed to heal myself and that I had to put the focus on myself and I had to put the focus on my relationships, my behavior, my reaction, my inability to set boundaries. I had to learn how to get better and I had to learn how to heal myself before I could be any help to anyone else in my family.
It's so hard for people to accept that, right? So maybe even unfair is not the right word. It goes back to the core of life is not fair. Sort of like, God, why me? Like, why do I have to change when this person in my life is a fucking disaster? Right?
Yeah.
And it's so hard for people to kind of wrap their heads around that when they're in it, for sure, but also looking on the outside. And so maybe can you describe, I mean, you did just now, but anecdotes or other things that helped you come to that realization? And
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that really helped me was I actually worked. I did the work. First of all, you got to do the work. I mean, that's key. I went into Al-Anon not really sure, it was going to be helpful or not, and then I realized that the only person you can really change in your life is yourself, and if I was going to change, I needed help. And so the first thing I did was I got a sponsor, and there was this incredible woman,
Mm.
was alive for 2 years, who gave me her heart and soul, and she led me through the 12 steps, and I went through those steps, and I journaled, and I really did a lot of introspection about all the relationships in my life, not just with the addict and the alcoholic, but with everybody in my life, all my family members, extended family members, friends, everyone. And I realized, and you get to the fourth step where
Maybe, sorry, let's,
we're going too far ahead,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
the
yeah,
whole
yeah, yeah.
process was that I did the work.
Yeah,
I did
yes,
the
yes,
work and I
yes,
had
yes.
someone to guide me.
Yeah. So I was just thinking maybe it's helpful to go step by step, perhaps. So
Right.
the step one you were
Right.
describing was the
If
acceptance
I
and
can
the
just
surrender. I am powerless over, and I wanted to clarify that when it's a family member or anyone for that matter, if we're not the person with the substance abuse problem, the problem is still our desire to control the substance in someone else or the behavior and how that disrupts our lives, which you did describe. And that's how it is sort of the step one for Al-Anon is we are powerless over this person and the substance, and we're driving ourselves crazy and becoming ill, which you
right.
described. And then Step 2 came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. So that is the admission of our own insanity, right?
That's
And that
correct.
we can get better.
That's right.
And then, so you kind of described that too, but any other thoughts on step 2?
Yeah, I wrote some,
Yeah.
this is more of a spiritual aspect. So, I mean, for me, when I walked into Al-Anon, I was numb. I mean, I didn't even know what I was feeling. I mean, there was so many layers that I had to untangle of why I was feeling the way I was feeling, why I was reacting, you know, all the details, why I couldn't focus on myself, why was I obsessed, with the alcoholic. I mean, I was just out of control, really,
Mm.
in so many ways. And this is the spiritual aspect where you have to realize that it doesn't have to be God. It can be nature, it can be a chair. I mean, it can be anything, but you have to find a power greater than yourself to believe in order to really move, I think, to step 3. And
Can it be, sorry to interrupt you,
yeah, that's okay.
can it be simply not our self-centered egoic will? Sam Harris, who's a staunch atheist, says it can just be wonder, the wonder of the universe, which is a power certainly greater than ourselves.
Right,
I like this idea of just not that self-centered fear controlling self-will.
right, right.
So anything other than that.
Well, fear makes you do a lot of crazy things. When you have a loved one and you are living in fear every day, and when I talk about fear, I'm talking about the fear of losing a loved one. It's the fear of death. It's the
Mhm.
fear of all the consequences that
Right.
come with alcoholism. It's whatever you want to call it, whether it's a criminal record or if it's a school issue, if you have a young child, if it's it could be anything, but most of the time when it comes to addiction, I would say it's the fear of death. It's the fear of one's health actually crumbling to the point that will not they will not be here anymore.
Yeah. And then, as you just said, the fallout of that.
And the
S-
fallout.
Right. With extended family, with
Right.
the whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. And if you've never lived with addiction, it throws you like it's like a wave, it's like a massive tsunami hitting you. I used to talk in some of my meetings about just walking into our house, and I felt like I was just literally walking on broken glass and cutting my feet. That's how painful it was for me. And the thing about step 2 is, and I wrote here in some of my
Hmm.
notes, is that it is the possibility of hope. And before I went into Al-Anon, I had no hope. Everything was hopeless. I mean, it was just painful. I was numb. I was frantically trying to control everything and everyone in our household. I was just, my life was unmanageable.
How did you, I assume it was similar reasons, end up in the meditation groups? And so you were pursuing your own
I was pursuing
care,
my
I guess,
own
or
therapy.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
um, at this point. And the reason why I was going into therapy on my own was because I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. When I tried to talk to a lot of family members who have never really understood or has seen addiction, you can't even explain to them how
Yeah.
crazy all of this is. And they sort of think you're crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
everybody,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not saying everybody, but there were many people in my family who thought I was pretty crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, they didn't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
They didn't understand my obsession with the loved one
Yeah.
who had the issue.
And what,
And
and meaning, why don't you just ignore them or something? Or why, what was sort of that, what is that misunderstanding?
I think the misunderstanding is nobody really wants to know the truth. I don't think people really don't want to know the truth. I think they, just like I lived in denial for probably a good 10 years about how to deal with myself. I think most people don't want to talk about uncomfortable issues because they feel uncomfortable
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And they sometimes may have to, in some sense, when you acknowledge the reality of somebody else, there's a part of you that knows that saying, but for the grace of God, go I kind of idea, right?
Yes.
Or if I acknowledge this to you, then I must acknowledge it as a reality. And maybe that, I think humans are naturally this way, but then it becomes, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me, right? Or I don't want to have to face my own reality. which I guess is what you're saying with the truth thing, right?
Well, and what I'm thinking about as well is that, I mean, I carried a lot of guilt and shame,
Yeah.
a lot of guilt and shame, sorry,
Okay, that's a yeah,
and I was embarrassed.
yeah,
I, that's why I started with therapy first.
right.
That's how I ended up being in the mindful based stress reduction
Yeah,
course with
yeah.
you, was a suggestion from my therapist. I realized I needed help, but I didn't know where to start.
And maybe let's linger on that shame piece a little bit. I know I went to Al-Anon for similar reasons, I guess you could say, along with AA and all the things. I don't think I realized how difficult it was. It's hard for me to untangle my own insanity from the insanity of, well, I've talked to him on this podcast, my brother. So his mental illness and addiction stuff, and how I've never really talked about it in depth with my parents. Like I have a bit, but the shame and the guilt and the social sense of isolation from your social networks and just that whole it's so painful to talk about and think about that we're just going to kind of pretend it's not happening. And in some ways that's a coping mechanism,
It
right? Like
is. It's a
yeah,
coping mechanism. I mean,
yeah,
I did it for 10 years,
right,
right?
right,
I did it for 10 years that I just, everything was okay with me. Everything was fine with me. But boy, oh boy, you know,
right.
the person who had the problem, well, that was it. The problem in my life was the person who had the
Yeah.
problem. And I think, one of the things that I recognize so wholeheartedly after, a full 3 years in Al-Anon, but, I can stretch it to 5 years,
Hmm.
is, you cannot have like, there is no cure. There is no cure for your pain without you seeking to find some serenity. And I remember my sponsor telling me with all my problems, and you have lots of problems in life, and this program has helped me with all my problems and a lot of relationship problems outside of the alcoholic, that if you take your problems and you put it up to the light of the serenity prayer, and I don't know if you want to
Yeah, sure.
say it.
Yeah. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
If you can take your problems and put it in and shed light with the serenity prayer, she said to me, you can always find a path forward. And it was great advice. And I use it all the time when I'm stuck, when I'm in a situation that I don't like, that doesn't feel well in my gut. Sometimes, or if I'm angry about something, I've discovered when I'm angry, 95% of the time, it's because I haven't set a boundary. And so my anger is mine to own, and the anger of others in my life is theirs to own.
Are you familiar with the book, The Courage to Be Disliked?
No,
No, okay.
no.
Whatever. It's all about boundaries really and sort of owning our shit. All of these teachings from all over the place are so similar.
But the book Mike suggested to me, Boundaries, which is
Oh yeah,
by
yeah, it's
Dr.
so
Henry
good.
Cloud, and I have to
And
say,
Townsend.
when
Yeah, yeah.
Townsend too, yes, right. That book was a lifesaver for me. It brought the light bulb on in more ways than one about
Good.
how I could not only protect myself, but also ensure that everybody else in my life took on an appropriate amount of responsibility for their actions, and that I didn't have to carry the weight for everybody in my family for their poor choices or their
Behavior. Yeah,
misdeeds or
yeah,
their
yeah.
poor behavior or their anger. I wasn't that I set up walls. It was that I needed to set boundaries about what I was willing to accept. It was funny because my family would say, "Well, here she's talking about, I have a boundary. Here she comes."
People don't like it when we change. That's another interesting part of this.
Right.
I want to just circle back to you said something about the pain doesn't go away or something. We can't make it go away or it's such
Eh,
an important reminder of just the reality of suffering, right? And
yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned is that we all suffer and that we are not in control of, whether we're going to feel pain or
right,
hurt.
right, right.
I mean, if our loved one ends up getting so sick that they are living in terrible conditions or they end up dying, happens quite frequently, by the way,
Yeah.
that we can't, we can't carry that. Well, we carry grief with us, but that pain is going to be there and the suffering will be there and we can't avoid it. And the only way we can get healthy is to work through our grief, our shame, our pain.
Yeah.
And I have learned, especially with Al-Anon, that the biggest emotion that was in my heart and in my soul that was incredibly painful was it was grief. And it was not losing a loved one, but it was the loss of the dream. And so the dream that I had for myself, for my loved one, for how I wanted my family life to be, I had certain dreams, and you can call them expectations, but I call them dreams. And though I lost my dreams and I had to grieve for them. And they were my dreams. They were not, they were my dreams that I had for other people. And the other people didn't have those dreams.
Right. And they
Uh,
were, it's such an important part because, and that it's helpful for me to be reminded of that. And maybe I'm seeing it in this moment more clearly than I have before. Yeah. It's our dreams, right? So when I think about, the way I relate to this, oh, if that hadn't happened to this person, my life would be better. Right? It's not even about them. Like, of course it is, and there's compassion there and love or whatever, but those are my dreams rather than this is just how it is and this is who this person is. And if I can come to accept that, then I can be, or the opportunity, you used the word serenity earlier too, the opportunity for some form of serenity can only arise, right, in the acceptance of these things.
yes. And the acceptance of who these people are
Right, right.
and who your loved one is who is struggling. And I can tell you that w- as I went through the program, I had a greater amount of compassion for the suffering and pain that my loved one was going through. And Gabor Mate says, and his famous line is, ask not why the addiction, ask why the pain. And I still think I've heard Mike's theories on this that I think there are some addictions that are they're scientific,
Mm.
they're genetic, and it's unfortunate, and they just are. And but I do believe that there is so much pain and suffering around that addiction, the shame, the guilt that the addict carries with them, that we don't, as a society, really look at it as a disease.
I don't have the words in this moment to articulate the medicalization of mental illness and mental health and addiction and all these things. There certainly is well, I do have the DSM over there, 800 pages of
Right.
describing medically mental illness. But yeah, so back, I want to maybe,
Backtrack.
yeah, I'm getting lost in the medicalization of it all and all the jargon in my head
Should we
around
go
that.
back to the steps?
Yeah. So back to came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. And then
Mm.
3, I think, is turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God.
That's correct. This is to leave our concern. I think I'm just going to read something I wrote here. This is
Mhm.
to leave our concerns, thoughts, choices, relationships, worries, fears, resentments, loves, dreams, wishes in the care of God of our understanding. And so this is for you to really, and for me at this point, and when I went through step 3, this was for me to give it all up.
The controlling,
The
the
controlling, the
dreams, the
dreams, the everything, the goals,
yeah, yeah.
just if you're I was very A-type personality, everything was goal-oriented. It's to give it all up. You need to give it all up, and you need to say to yourself, "I need to see what is. I need to accept what is. I need to see this person for who they are, and I need to love them for who they are in this moment, right here, right now."
I'm getting some mild goosebumps with that. The and ourself too, right?
Oh,
'Cause
yes,
yeah.
and we need to also forgive ourselves for maybe, the harm we had caused others. We have to, forgive ourselves that, not in a, you know, mean way,
Hmm.
but I
Hmm.
think we need to forgive ourselves in the sense that we did the best we could. A lot of these journeys, even in Japan, they have the 88 temples. And what I love about it is they talk about do your best. We're all doing our best. The alcoholic is doing their best.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to come to that conclusion when you don't believe that, when you believe that they can just stop. They can just stop drinking. They can just not go out to bars anymore. They can just stop.
Yeah, yeah. Why won't they just stop? Huh. I want to. This. I think it's the third step prayer, or the extension of the third step is turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God, praying only for the knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. And I think that's where the surrender and the letting go of that self will we talked about,
Yes.
and control and etc. And then allowing God's will, which in an atheistic sense is just good orderly direction, they say sometimes, or what humans have known for thousands of years on how to live somewhat of a contented life, right? So that's what the
Right.
steps are, is that if you live
Right.
this way, you will probably feel better,
Right.
and the Buddhists have a notion of that, and the Catholics or Christians do, I'm sure, and the Stoics and the whoever. And so that's what we're turning over to that, or we're open to welcoming good, orderly direction, right?
Yes. And I think what's in that is the acceptance of reality. And I think that um, you have to wait for a while before you
Yes.
start to accept and see what the true reality of your life is. And we all have these when we're in pain, as you were talking about, and I don't know what the right word is, where, you're numbing everything. It's like this mechanism that's just saving you from feeling more and more pain all at the same time. But that doesn't mean that there's layers and layers and layers of your pain and of your suffering that you need before you get to see reality.
Okay, so if we can surrender our will, open up to this idea that other people can help us, or
Right.
a higher power, a
Right.
God, the universe, a tree, a chair, whatever, then I think is faith. Faith is step 3, the principle. Or hope and faith, I always get mixed up. But 2 and 3 are about hope and faith. 1 is about honesty. 4 is about courage. So can you maybe tell us
Right.
you were gonna start talking about it a few moments ago, your
Right.
experience with step 4.
Sure. So, step 4 is made us searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And for a lot of people, because I've also been a sponsor for, had some sponsees, this is always a very, very difficult step. It was difficult for me. So, basically, you're making an inventory of yourself and your relationships with others. I went on the internet, and you can go on the internet for the 4th step, and you can get all these little charts, and some of them are for fear, for resentment. I mean, you can get them for everything,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sex,
Yeah.
for whatever. You can get them for
Yeah.
every single issue that you have,
Yeah.
and guilt and shame. And then they have questions there about who you need to write down, like who you think you've harmed and why are you angry? Why are you resentful? Why are you this? Why are there that? And it takes some time. It takes some
Indeed.
time to write these things down. When you start writing them down, you really realize, like, I had a lot to write.
Yeah. I remember I've told this story before on this podcast. I'll say it again. Just the first time I came to my sponsor with my 4th step, he kindly said, "What the fuck is this? Go back to the drawing board, buddy, and work a little harder, dig a little deeper." And then I did. And yeah, there were
Right,
in the hundreds of entries on that. And it took, I don't know how many hours,
right.
at least 10 hours
Yeah,
minimum of speaking through it all with him. But right, so you write all these things down.
yeah,
You did a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. I
yeah.
like in AA, I'm not as familiar with the Al-Anon literature, just haven't read it over and over. I have AA. Sort of, it's the same as any business. They always use the business analogy. If a business does not take stock of its
That's
liabilities,
right.
it goes bankrupt. And so it's the same with us. It's really that journey of what is wrong with me and why am I making myself suffer more and hence likely those around me suffer more. So
Right.
that's what it people do chafe at the moral language or the can you
Right.
maybe describe the paradox of when we look in the mirror and face our darkness and all these unpleasant things, we are simultaneously freed from them, right? Or free from the grip of it.
Right.
And that is such a, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. It is the beauty of all of this happening at the same time. At least that's how it is for me.
Well, I think when I did this step, and I'm just going to be pretty realistic
Hmm.
about it, and I've written down some things. I mean, it's, you identify your characteristics, which I never really thought about, your thought and your behavior patterns, your relationships and events. And they also want you to acknowledge your strengths.
Yes.
And this is not about acknowledging your weaknesses. This is about putting down the lay of the land. It's putting down, like,
Right.
how are you feeling right now? How do you feel about your relationships? It's more about, like, how's this working for you? That's what I got from my sponsor. And I think for her, she said, Jennifer, your name should be on the top of the list, right? Because we also need to forgive ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I
so,
want to, sorry to
but
interrupt you.
yeah,
The Al-Anon language is, I say this to people often, and you just beautifully described it. It is more, I don't know if it's compassionate, but there's something about the Al-Anon literature that is absent in AA that's just beautiful. And I think you described an outcome of that is the lay of the land. How is this all working for you as opposed to, and it's not always this way, but a lot of people criticize their experience in AA or can be criticized. It's too harsh and too, you're a fucking addict. And if you don't fucking do this and you're self-centered, which is
right.
not, the Al-Anon language is not that way,
It's
in
not,
my
and it's not
experience.
the
Yeah.
approach.
Right,
I think
right,
I
right,
think the
right, right.
approach, I think what I recognized, and I put a little thing
Yeah.
here, is that this step is actually for our growth.
Mm,
That we do these steps to free of judgment, and we don't want to use this as a weapon of self-abuse. We want this
right.
to be
Yes, yes.
a method of growing. It's just like, I mean, when everybody talks about failure, right? Right.
Yes.
Failure is is miserable if you don't see it as a step for growth, right?
Yeah,
So to fail is not to be a failure. To fail is an opportunity to grow. And
yeah,
I think this is what this step is all about. And I realized at this point that I think I realized for the first time in my life that my self-esteem was probably at the lowest it could possibly have been at any point in my life. That it was my self-esteem that was suffering as part of this disease, part
yeah,
of the
yeah,
sickness, part of the reason why
yeah.
I needed to get help, and I couldn't do it on my own. I could not have done this on my own without the help of Al-Anon.
Yeah, just the reminder of can't we nobody does anything alone. There's some sort of weird illusion around that often that we get caught in or people often get caught in. And I don't know, everyone has their own reason why or whatever, but I forget this. I used to often reference this idea of anything I could get my filthy hands on, I would get. But once you are open to it, I had Al-Anon, I went to AA, I went to marijuana, like I went to all these 12-step groups. I had a therapist. I did the meditation groups. So we need help and that's okay. And some of us maybe need more help than others, but that's okay, right?
Right.
I guess it goes back to the growth idea that you're talking about, right? It's
Well,
not failure, it's learning and
and
it's
it's right. It's learning about yourself. It's
yes.
learning about your characteristics. It's learning about your behavior patterns with relationships, and it just opens it wide open. Um, there is a sense of relief. And when you sit down with your sponsor and you walk through all of your stuff, it's like, whoa, you take this load on
Yeah,
your
yeah,
shoulders,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's like
yeah.
this.
Relief is a lovely word for it. There's a sentence in one of those worksheets which I've shared on this channel actually a bunch. Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person entirely. What was our part in the situation? And to what you've been talking about, and I think Al-Anon articulates this beautifully, is yeah, it's not to shit on ourselves and to blame ourselves, right? It's to separate at what we can control and what we cannot, and realize how we are the cause of our suffering, and also the solution to our suffering is in us. And that's what I think step 4 does almost better than any therapeutic tool I've ever seen in my life, to be honest.
It was a big one for me, and I've kept, of course, I've kept all my journaling, and I refer back to my charts. I refer back to them every once in a while. I was gonna bring them here, and I thought, "Oh, boy, there's too much in there."
When we write down terrible things that have happened to us, or that other people have done that we're resentful about, none of this is a condoning of how other people have treated us, right? If people have treating you badly or have done terrible things to you, none of this is about saying that that's okay.
No,
Right.
not at
Yeah.
all.
But I think
And
it's important to specify that, because sometimes people
right,
say,
right,
if I acknowledge that I have a part in accepting how I'm making this worse for myself, then somehow I'm condoning being treated terribly.
right, and we can go on to the whole thing about forgiving others, right? You can I believe you forgive to release the pain for
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
if you're willing to forgive, and if you're not willing to forgive, if it's a heinous crime, I totally understand that. I just feel that if you can forgive, you don't have to forget. You know, you don't have to
Yeah.
forget
Yeah.
what someone has done to you. You don't have to forget or be weary of dealing with them in the future. But somehow forgiving them is, for me, was helpful, if that makes any
It
sense.
does. It does. Yeah. It's
It's
not
not that
about
I
the other
forgot
person.
about how I was treated, but I was able to forgive them. That doesn't happen right away, by the way. It's a process.
Indeed. So, and then step 5 is admitted
Right.
to God, to
Uh,
myself, or to myself, to God, and another human being, the exact nature of my wrongs, which is
right.
the reading through of all of these inventories.
That's right. And so when you share them, and I mean, I stepped ahead that I did share them. I think one of the things that comes through the blue book of how Al-Anon works is we learn that anything that we've done that we feel shameful or terrible about is really not that horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have that written down here. And then it also gives us courage to challenge our fears, the fears that are right in front of you, the fears that are maybe in the future or behind you, or whatever you might be fearful or shameful of. It gives you the courage to
Yeah.
face them. And the other thing is you are identifying the exact nature of your wrongs, and it gives you that opportunity to also acknowledge our talents, our strengths, our positive attributes, and our positive actions. One of the things that came out of that step with me, for me, was self love and self care. And that came through again with my sponsor, going through this step with her pointing out how many times are you going to be this hard on yourself?
Wow. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
how many times are you going to take the hit for this when this was outside of your control? Those kind of comments,
It's beautiful.
you
Yeah.
know,
It's so lovely.
how come you're being so hard on yourself? Have you thought about that?
We learn this in the self-compassion program, I think, very thoroughly, is maybe not this exactly, but the notion of we try to solve the problem because we can't control the external,
That's right.
then the brain turns inward. So if I can shit on myself and criticize myself and blame myself, that gives me the illusion of control. My sponsor would always say, intentions are good, methods are flawed. So we're trying to fix the problem and the pain. And since we can't control someone else, we might as well try to control ourselves, right? Or give us the illusion of that. And that's what the self criticism often is.
Right. And for me, I mean, if I can be quite honest, I mean, I was the control freak in the family, right? So
Hmm.
I was the one trying to control people, places, and things. And I was trying to control even the mood of our place, when you had extended family members over, right?
Hmm.
And just
Hmm.
trying to pretend everything was okay.
Yeah, right.
Does
And
that make any,
oh, does
does that make any
I
sense?
know the insanity in my own life. An example would be something, someone in the house is sick or unwell, or you're losing your mind. But if the house is clean, or the meal is cooked properly and everyone's sitting at the table and nobody's complaining and nobody. Ah, yes.
Well, the whole like family, as everybody talks about how terrible family get-togethers sometimes can be, right?
Yeah.
Family occasions, whether they're weddings or Christmas or whatever, there's a lot of emotions that are piled into these big family get-togethers. And you see movies of these sort of things
You do.
where the alcoholic goes crazy and causes a lot of commotion, right? And all you can think about is the fear of something blowing up.
Because as you were mentioning earlier, it's trying to control having to face the truth of your life.
Right.
Something like that.
And also maybe accepting that when things go out of control, that you're not responsible for it, right? Like you're not responsible for it. And if people want to look at you differently
Right.
and make judgments about you, well, maybe that's just okay,
Lovely. Okay, so step 4 and 5.
right?
Step 6.
Is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character.
Thank you. So we get the lay of the land, as you say.
Yeah,
We see the map.
right?
We're aware of what our shortcomings are, defects, etc. And I don't know, what was your experience with that?
Um, well, this for me was to let go and let God. So there was a woman who used this analogy, and it was just beautiful. I used this every night I went to bed. She always took her loved one and wrapped her loved one in a big warm blanket in her mind and handed her loved one up to the universe. And I that image for me was very, very helpful at, especially when you know, there's chaos all the time, by the way. If you live with an addict, every day is chaos. It's not just, oh, you're going to have some one big explosion. Every day is chaos. And just that image when I went to bed at night to, let go. This is one of
Mm.
they have these, what are they called?
Slogans?
Slogans.
Yeah.
Let God and let go.
Let
Sorry,
go
let
and
go
let
and
God.
let God.
Yeah.
That for me helped me go to bed at night. They say that in this step,
Yeah.
that you learn to mind your own business, you stay in your own lane, you stop being preoccupied with the alcoholic, and we realize that we're not alone. That's what this step is supposed to help us with.
What is your experience with we're entirely ready? So I can think of probably still to this day, in moments I can be ready to let go, but in
Right,
some moments I don't want to let go. And I often think of another one of these memories that is so crystal clear to me. I can just replay the scene now. I'm in my
right,
kitchen washing the dishes. My wife says something. I get triggered or I am triggered, right?
right,
And my wife's not the addict here. So anyway, just in case anyone's assuming that, I was the addict and I have it in my family. So I have both my nuclear family. And I remember I'm washing the dishes and I had this moment of this is what they mean of a shortcoming coming up and asking God to let it go or being willing not to entertain this shortcoming. And it might have been,
right,
it was probably anger, self-righteousness, whatever,
right,
scorn, whatever the fuck it was in that moment of just
right,
dumping my anger on my wife.
right,
And there's just, I think that I maybe, I don't know how many seconds, 10, 20 seconds. I just was like washing the dishes and I'm like, this is what they mean, ask God to help let go of this. And I was just like, no, fuck it. And I couldn't let go of that
right,
child scare. I don't know, whatever, that poison of pride or something. And I just fucking made the situation so much worse by just
right.
being an asshole. And I
And
wasn't ready, I guess.
But this step, I wasn't completely ready either.
Yeah.
I mean, I was still, stumbling and making mistakes every day and blowing up. But the whole idea is that when the alcoholic is acting up, you don't react, right?
Right.
Very hard to do in some circumstances.
Yeah.
My sponsor here gave me she just said, fake it until you make it. And because I was not doing very well with this step.
Uh-huh.
So I figured if I just kept on
Yeah,
faking it
yeah, yeah.
and forgiving myself when I did not have the control that was required
Mhm.
to make the change, because we're all human and we all make mistakes. And change is incredibly difficult, especially with relationships and especially with these very high explosive situations.
Right. And knowing what the alternative action is, that's what I was trying to say. So if it's pride, what is the opposite of pride? Right? If I'm going to lash out in anger, what is the opposite of that? So in those moments where so if I'm willing to let go of pride and self-righteous anger, what am I going to do instead? And that I find very helpful because we do need to direct our attention and our action and our energy somewhere so we can let go and we
Right.
can not react. Although then what? Maybe we just go on, but sometimes it's helpful to know, what do I do instead?
Well, I think you need to sit with your anger. So again, this was, my sponsor always said to me, like, if you're going to blow, remove yourself from the room. Like, get out of there,
Yeah,
go
yeah,
for a
yeah,
walk.
yeah,
Like, you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
have
yeah,
to,
yeah,
right? Like, you
yeah,
don't have to respond. You can just listen. You should listen,
yeah,
by the way.
yeah,
You should listen to what they have to say. And then you should get yourself out of there and you can close a door and go into a room,
yeah,
or you could go for a walk.
yeah,
And usually I would feel a lot of anger because that's what was provoking me, right? That's the
yeah,
poking of the bear, right?
yeah.
And I would, if I sat with it for about a week, but I asked myself, and my sponsor always said, why are you angry? Why am I angry?
Yeah.
And I don't know, sometimes for a week I would ask, "Why am I angry?"
Mhm,
And I wouldn't know, right?
mhm.
And then finally at the end of the week I would say, "Darn it all, I got it. What? I didn't set a boundary. Someone crossed my boundary,
Yeah,
and so now I'm going to create a boundary."
yeah.
And so I realized that my anger was up to me. It was up to me to manage. It was up to me to discover why I was angry, and it was up to me to determine how to make a change. And I'm not saying that, you make changes that are going to change the world, but it could be just a small change that allowed me to feel like I had choices.
I want to read something from the AA 12 and 12 around that. That the timeout idea that you were just talking
Right.
about was something that became incredibly helpful for me. And I guess it was more, as you are describing, it wasn't about the other person. It never is. I
No,
got to remind myself of that
I
too.
know it
Yeah.
never is.
So I need a timeout here because I'm going to make the problem worse.
That's correct.
Yes. And I really identify with what you're saying of, if I sit with that question, what is actually happening here? And people, I think when we're so entangled in the mess, it takes a while, right, for the tangle or the cloud of confusion and pattern repetition of how we used to behave and how we used to handle situations to settle. Then God can come in, my self will can go away. I can get help and guidance from others. Then it becomes clear. For me too, I think it's often a boundary. Like, I didn't say something,
Right.
I didn't stick up for myself. Maybe sometimes I don't want to accept that I behaved poorly and need to address that. And that was my sponsor was so helpful at that. Just, Mike, this is not about your fucking wife. Stop complaining about her.
Right.
When are you going
Right.
to stop complaining about
Right.
her, Mike, so I can actually, talk here or something? And then returning to the scene of the crime, and taking responsibility for our part, which is also a tough pill to swallow. But
Yes.
right, so something like, yeah, I either could have. This goes back to what we talked to about the forgiveness piece. So whatever you did is still not okay, and I know I could have behaved better in that situation. But this is not giving you a pass, because sometimes that
Right.
happens too a lot, right? As we sort of play this who wins here kind of game. But for us, it's about, what did we do? What can we do differently? And if we need to say or take responsibility for our behavior, then we do. That's kind of how I went through it. And then, as you were saying in this timeout, there's a reading in the 12 and 12. I can't remember what step it's in, but nothing pays off like restraint of tongue and pen. We must avoid quick tempered criticism and furious power driven argument. The same goes for sulking or silent scorn. These are emotional booby traps baited with pride and vengefulness. Our first job is to sidestep the traps. When we are tempted by the bait, we should train ourselves to step back and think. For we can neither think nor act to good purpose until the habit of self restraint has become automatic. Whew, that
That
describes me so
that
well.
yeah,
And
and it's so hard.
it's hard. Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
really
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is hard.
Al-Anon has the slogan, "Think."
Yeah.
Is it thoughtful, honest, intelligent, necessary, and kind? I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
based on, some of my issues, one of the things that I didn't truly do, when I now realize I'm angry, is that I don't always listen to the other person, like true listening skills to what they're trying to articulate, even though their anger is showing up and is being critical of me. I missed out for a long time acknowledging, either something that I might have done to send this person off, or um, I I didn't listen intently to the undertones of what the person was trying to say to me. The other thing too is, become a bit of a control freak, and I was one. You tell people what you think they should do or who they should be, or I was very good at always saying, you need to see a doctor. And at times I continue with this thought process, which is I'm scared and it's wrong. You don't give the person, especially when it's an alcoholic or an addict, you don't give them the dignity of solving their own problems. And you don't give them, if you're telling somebody, which I'm often I'm often in trouble because it's the wrong thing to do. But if you are giving someone advice that is unwanted, you're hurting your relationships. And I have lived that way for a long time, giving unwanted advice to a lot of people because I thought I knew more than others. And I really have learned I know nothing. There's a bit of humility that has
Indeed.
come through this program.
Humility is the principle of step 7, I think,
I think so.
which is
Uh,
simply ask him to remove our shortcomings.
That's right.
Yeah.
And with humility comes self acceptance.
Mhm.
I just wrote this. We accept we are not all powerful and that there are limits to what we can achieve by ourselves. And again, it talks about self will, which you've talked about as well. And it's it's a it's a humble, to learn how to be humble is it's a very big step when it's not ingrained in your nature.
Mhm.
And I remember my sponsor asking me, because in some of the questions, in that yellow book, or it's sort of beige, uh, they ask you, who in your life is the most humble person?
I
And
remember that one, but that's amazing. Yeah.
it just think about somebody in your life who is humble all the time, then try to emulate them.
Mm.
See how they talk to other people, see how they approach things. Monitor when you're with them, how they live their lives. And it's amazing what you can learn from them.
Where I have role models in that respect, I think, is athletes, actually. Some
Hmm.
athletes, Wayne Gretzky in particular, he's showered with praise all the time. And sometimes he'll acknowledge it, he'll acknowledge his greatness, but so rarely. It's always my dad, this, my teammates, this, my wife, my this. And there's a part of me that doesn't want to accept it, it's sort of, but it's beautiful to see when the embodiment of that energy and that character trait.
Well, he's living with an attitude of gratitude.
Yeah. And maybe just in fairness, he is the great one.
He
So
is.
he's like, I know part of him must know, and which he does acknowledge. So sometimes maybe I'm trying to rationalize it myself or give myself a pass. But if you know you're that great, it's a little easier to be humble, maybe. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that, you have to forge a path in your life, and that path is something that each one of us has our own journey. You know, we all have our own journey. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and we need to forge a path of wellness. And, you know, mental health really wasn't a big deal.
Mhm.
And I think having an attitude of gratitude for people who are just so thankful for their lives and
Yeah.
for their families and for the people who help them along the way, I think it's just a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. And as you were talking, it helped to remind me that the humility, in a sense, is humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. I am not the one in control here. And
That's
if I can remind myself of that, it helps to be humble. And I often think of Sam Harris, who's a philosopher, mindfulness neuroscientist person, often talks about the illusion of the self-made man. We didn't choose our genetics, we didn't choose our parents, we didn't choose where we were born, we didn't life is so random and outside our control that yes, we can work hard and we can direct our attention and our energies and etc. And this notion of our ego controlling things and taking credit for things and all that stuff is an illusion in a way. And as you were talking, I was reminded of that idea. And it helps me a lot to remind myself that it's also
it's
fucking random, right? Like, it's just like, what? How are you and I sitting here
I
having
have
this
no
conversation, right?
honestly,
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
no idea.
It's like we met in a fucking meditation class 8 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah,
And here we are talking about these things. So it's so random.
it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It is a random it's, you know, your journey is yeah, it's you have no idea the twists and turns
Yeah.
that your life can have.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I just yeah, I
Can we?
think maybe we should go on to step
Yeah, let's
8.
do it. Let's do it.
Step 8 is made a list of all the persons we have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all.
And
The,
became willing, I think. Is
became,
it? It
sorry.
is.
Or,
It is. I think it's became.
became, sorry. What did I
You
say?
said become.
Oh, became.
No,
Yes,
that's a.
and
I'm not
became
much of
willing.
a. I'm not much of a English language scholar.
No, but you're
Not.
right. I missed it. It's my poor writing here.
Oh, that's also the part
This,
of me. Sometimes I'll sit when I'm in meetings and somebody 50% of the time misreads step 12.
oh,
And
yes.
they say, as a result, it's as a result, having had a spiritual awakening, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. That's not what it is. It's having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. And anyway, that little ego in me is like, oh, you
Right.
didn't say it right. You know, like, no, that
But
man.
that's okay.
Anyway, yeah. So it's just,
So, yeah.
so
So I don't know how you found this step, but this step was really interesting for me. I mean, the way it turned out, first of all, I was afraid.
of
I've
writing it or of,
no, I mean, I wrote my force.
yeah,
I
yeah,
wrote it.
yeah.
Uh, I was afraid of meeting with each
Yes, yeah,
individual
yeah.
on a one-on-one basis. How was I going to do it? You know, just the whole coordination thing of it, and how was it going to be received? You know, there's some people you can't get to face
Mhm.
to face, so you got a phone, and then there's some people that, quite frankly, they're not in your lives, and it doesn't really make a difference whether you see them or not.
Maybe we should just read step 9 in conjunction with in
Right.
step in
Oh, because this is where you open up, right? Whereas step 9 is where you make direct amends
right,
to
right, right.
such
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
people. Where
Except when to do so would injure them or others.
that's
Yeah,
correct. Sorry. So I'm talking about step 8
yeah,
and 9.
yeah.
So step 8 is this is your step towards healing, I guess. This is the step where you contemplate how you're going to do it. You have to write it all down
Yeah.
first. That's correct. This is taking responsibility for our actions and the consequences of those actions.
8 is making the list. 9 is the action of doing the amends. And
And owning up to what we've done.
yes, yeah. My experience with it was much more of living amends. I definitely made direct amends to some people when it could happen because my world had become so small.
Right.
Didn't I mean, I had harmed people in my youth for sure. And a lot of that was accept when to do so would injure them or others. So this idea of there is no use in me going back to a childhood friend who I probably stole something from and being like, "Hey, when we were 7, I stole this thing from you."
But you were owning up to it.
To my sponsor.
Yeah, to your
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
sponsor.
yeah, yeah,
So you
yeah.
were owning up to it,
Indeed, indeed, and
but you might
yeah,
not know where that person lives
sure,
anymore or
sure, sure.
right.
And the other living amends to my family, and I think there's some wisdom in the made direct amends to such people, except when to do so would injure them or others, because oftentimes we start recovering, we start changing, and we want to go on the mountaintop with our microphone, like, look how good I am. I'm so good. I don't treat people badly anymore. I need a pat on the back. Maybe that's a bit more with the addicts because we cause a lot of carnage, or we can. So that was kind of my general experience, was it's more of a living amends. And then also step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it, is step 8 and 9 in daily.
That's a daily
Yeah,
practice.
yeah, or
Yeah,
it could
yeah,
be, right, if you
right.
need to. So
I
that
think
I
we all need
excel at
to.
that one, or I don't wanna say I excel. I practice that pretty good, I think,
Right.
and so a lot of my step 8 and 9 work comes out in step 10, I guess, in my daily life. But yeah, that list and I think, in one of the columns, there's like it's like a, "No, I won't make this amends to this person
That's
because
right.
they're dead," or whatever,
Right.
or, "I won't ever see them again."
Right.
There's this people, "Yes, I will," and then there's a maybe, I think, or there's a
Right.
not sure yet or something, or do you remember?
Well, I think it was also, are you willing? Are you willing to
Right,
make amends to them directly or not?
right.
And in some cases, I think there were 3 checks. You're somewhat in the middle, yes or no, but
Yeah, yeah.
considering, um, yeah,
And
it's like in waiting.
right, and how did you go about that, or are you
Uh,
comfortable sharing any of
yeah,
those things?
so I made most of course, I had living amends because there were people who I wasn't able to contact or didn't know, anything about their lives
Yeah.
anymore. A lot of my amends were direct. They were, um They were very interesting to me. It was almost like the heavens opened up,
Mm.
because so many of the amends, I didn't know how I was going to get that person alone. And, how was I going to do that when might be an opportunity, but there's other people around? And how was I going to do that? And surprisingly, it happened over many months. These opportunities just opened up where I was alone with that individual and I was able to make my amends. Some people were pretty direct and said, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, like pretty hard. Like I had written 10 pages and okay, how do I put that in 2 minutes? So I really was on the ball to try to get the main themes in. And other people were, do you really need to do this? Is it really necessary for you to do this? Is this part of your healing journey? Is this, some people were a bit
Mhm,
skeptical about why I was doing it.
mhm.
But either way, I just had all these opportunities that came up. One family member said to me, I will forgive you if you will forgive me for what I did to you. I thought that was
Wow.
pretty, pretty unbelievable. I think there were and meaningful, like meaningful,
Yeah, yeah.
these were meaningful discussions. Some of them short, some of them, long, but they just opened up. Like I kept on worrying, like, can I possibly get this person or how can I possibly make this happen where it's just going to be one on one and somebody else isn't going to be able to hear it? And will I be able to get it out? And how do I feel about it? And they just came. They came and it happened. And I'm so grateful for it because doing it with people who were direct, it just felt like a load was off my shoulders.
Another load, right?
Right,
So
well,
yeah,
there's right, right,
yeah,
right,
which is wonderful. It's amazing. It really is amazing. It's a thorough house cleaning, if you will, of all the
right.
things that
And
keep us. Yeah.
I forgot that I had to write all those things in step 8. I just kept on thinking step 4 was the
Yeah, yeah.
monumental. That was the big list
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
basically I used for step
Yeah.
8.
Actually, there's a nice
And
thing in the Al-Anon here, which we kind of just discussed, but reading it, I think is nice. Occasionally, bringing up the past would only reopen old wounds and make matters worse. Direct amends are not appropriate if they will cause further harm. In such a case, amends might be made by avoiding the harmful behavior so that we will not hurt anyone else in the same way. For example, if we have harmed an elderly relative who has asked us to refrain from any further communication and therefore cannot make direct amends, we might vow never to repeat the same mistake with anyone else we encounter. There was a couple amends that I talked about with my sponsor, with my therapist, and with other fellows in the program. And that was the conclusion that
Right,
that
right,
we came to, or that I was
right.
guided to come to. As long as you do not do these things anymore or again or whatever,
That's right.
it doesn't serve you, the other person, or God to say anything
That's
about it. Yeah,
correct. And
that's a
I
tough
had 1 or 2 of those.
yeah, that's a tough one
And
because
the guidance,
yeah.
again, that's where you can't do this alone.
Yes, yes, yes.
This is, it's, having the sponsor and the meetings, the meetings is like group
Yeah, yeah.
therapy, right?
Yeah, 100. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's wonderful, and it helps you because when you go through the meetings, they talk about the steps and how to go through them, and you have a speaker who talks about them, and then everybody shares about what they went through with the steps, and you learn a lot.
So much.
You
So much wisdom.
There's
It's
just
unbelievable.
so much.
There is no other place in the world, even in the meditation groups that we were in, it just wasn't the context per se, right?
Right,
But sometimes people would get really sincere, but there is no place in the world that I've come across. I mean, there's other group things like this, but where just the raw honesty, openness, insight, wisdom that arises in these groups, and some groups obviously are different than each
right.
other, and maybe some more wisdom and some than others, but it's amazing.
It is
It's
amazing,
amazing.
and I have to say the literature is so well written. I mean, there's books that they have books and books and books. I own every single one of them. I have read and I continue to read. They have 3 daily readers. One's Courage to Change, one's out the Blue Al-Anon, and the other one is for the family one. But
Right.
there's 3 that have short daily readers that you can read in 10 minutes. You can also get it on your phone now. You can get an app on your phone with Al-Anon and read a daily reader that just takes 5 minutes out of your day
Not even
and
some of them, right?
yeah.
Minutes sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and they're just so helpful. I mean, I don't know how many people would, be walking around with their little it's just a small little
Yeah.
Courage to Change. I didn't bring it, but just in their purse or their backpack. Just that every day, they're on the bus or whatever. It's another reminder that this is where, this is where how we get courage. We change together. We have a group of people who can, quite frankly, I think the only thing that really helped me, or helped my spiritual soul, and I say it's my soul in a very deep way, was that I could speak the same language as other people in Al-Anon. Whereas nobody else could understand the pain, the suffering, the chaos, the what you go through with a loved one who has an addiction. You can't really explain it to someone else who hasn't gone through it.
No, you can't. When I was sobering up and whatever, changing all these kind of things, I was speaking a different language than my wife. One thing my sponsor would always say was, "You changed the marriage contract because you're not an addict anymore." Because when we got married, I was still high all the time. So she married that. Now you're changing, becoming a different person. And it was all for the good, but
Right?
still, I never said anything. I never spoke up for myself. I never pushed back. I never set boundaries. It was whatever. So I was changing, becoming a different person, and then expecting her to accept the terms of the new contract. To her great credit, didn't have to she could have just been like, "Fuck you,"
Right.
like, "What the hell's
Absolutely.
wrong with you?" You
Absolutely.
can't I don't gotta do nothing. You're the one who did all these things and whatever, like, you're the problem.
Right.
I got
Right.
nothing to deal with, and so, at some point, she as I continued to heal and was not doing any of the things, lying and getting high and all these things that I was doing, at some point, she had the moment of, "Okay, fine. I will take some responsibility for this marriage working or continuing to work, or even how I contributed to your." problems or whatever.
Right.
And then she went into Al-Anon and she did her stuff in Al-Anon. And then we had the shared language. So that was the whole thing around the shared language.
That's right.
So that was so helpful. And I sometimes forget to really acknowledge her and her, again, decision to say, fine, I'll go put some work in too. And then after that, and as we sort of continue to heal or whatever, even now, we speak that similar language of the serenity prayer, whatever. I will blame you for my problems at certain times, but once the dust settles,
Right. I'll
we
take
have the program,
responsibility.
right? We
Right.
have the program to help us with that
Right.
shared language. And
It's just like if you veer off and you have a bad day,
yeah,
right?
which we, yeah,
We all do,
yeah,
right?
indeed.
We all have a
Yes.
bad day. Then we can come back and we can admit our mistakes and we can evaluate how do we do today.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's the step 10,
Yes.
continue to
Yes.
take
Yes.
personal
Yes. Yes.
inventory. And when
Yes.
we were wrong, promptly admitted it.
Yes.
And I think I wrote some notes here about it being more of a daily process. And it's not just focusing on our errors, but some of our shortcomings. And the other thing is, we're human and we make mistakes
Mm.
and we are who we are. And I think accepting who we are and who our loved ones are is really that's the key to improving your relationships and your
Right.
family.
Yeah.
And then step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. So,
Yeah.
step 11, and I think that's where the will comes in.
Mhm.
We talk about that self will.
That's where the meditation groups were so helpful for
Right,
me.
right.
What is my spiritual ritual or prayer, meditation practice, etc.? What is it for you?
I found, even though I did a lot of meditation and I still occasionally can get myself into meditation mode, but I find that walking meditation for me. So, again, being alone, being in, as the Japanese call it, forest bathing. I love to walk. I love walking through the city alone. I love walking through all the ravines alone. I find that being in nature alone and with others, that there's camaraderie, but that I really did find that the walking meditation and being in nature gave me the space, if you want to call it, to sort of evaluate how things were going, how I was doing. And again, the whole thing about Al-Anon is putting the focus on yourself. That wasn't exactly what I thought when I showed up there in the first time, and I thought, "What are they talking about? Aren't they gonna help me understand the
Or whatever.
alcoholic?"
Yeah.
But really, no. I mean, the whole thing about Al-Anon is finding help for yourself, and they talk about experience, strength, and hope, and that is what you get. People can say, "Oh, what are you talking about, experience, strength, and hope?" Those words, if you peel them apart, you could literally have a few more talks on these 3 words. Having an experience of being able to be calm instead of being living in a frenzy, and in fear, and I mean paralyzing fear, right? Being able to, step back and look at things in a realistic way and see the true reality of your life and whether that's the kind of life you want to lead. I think that's, and hope for the alcoholic and hope for your family, that your family can have a more calming, less chaotic life, even though you have an alcoholic in the home. And I think that is hope. And instead of being hopeless, you have hope. And I'll bring up one of the things is that I've found very helpful is I walked the Camino, and we won't go into that, but
Another time we will.
yeah, another
But
time. But that too is healing, right? Walking on your own and being with others, sharing stories with others. That's all humanity. That's what humanity is all about. It's about us caring and sharing and deep, honest conversations. You don't go on the Camino. Nobody asks you what you do. They ask you, where are you from and where did you start? And then the conversation goes from there. And everybody has a story. There's not one person who's on the Camino who doesn't have a story, who doesn't share deeply about themselves and about their loved ones. It's just an incredible experience, and I think that's the thing about step 11. It's an incredible experience in Al-Anon. Once you get to step 11, you realize that you're able to really be with a higher power. It's not your sponsor, it's not the group that are in Al-Anon. You're on your own, and you're looking after yourself. You've got your own self-esteem. You've got your own idea of self-care. You've got your own idea of being able to protect yourself with reasonable boundaries. You've got your own ability to make choices and decisions on your own, and that you're willing to stand up to the consequences of those decisions. And that's a beautiful thing, to have a feeling that you're not alone.
Yes, wonderful. I like the sort of ex uh, eh, description of sort of sought through prayer and meditation. Yeah, it does not have to be, at least in my head, sitting in a chair meditating or on your knees praying or whatever it is. It can unfold in so many different ways. And I find pretty good at this when I'm in meetings or any. I mean, that's partly why I'm a therapist, is because I love listening to people. I meditate often in my therapy, and I remember so many of our meditation training is that meditative listening, right? So we're meditating and listening and being open. But I find being in meetings, in particular, closed meetings or sharing meetings or whatever, that's a very sort of deeply meditative prayer-like experience for me, and that's why I continue to go, because I don't do it on my own enough. If I put myself in a room full of people, I'll at least, have some social shame potential if I'm not paying attention or on my phone or whatever, and so I love doing that and listening, or I like walking too, doing all those other things, so, yeah, it's nice to be reminded that I heard, I don't know who he's a professor and, but he talked about, the importance of contemplation, I guess, and he would often talk about,
Right.
I think it was Abraham Lincoln or someone who spent a lot of time walking and thinking and walking and just being present or whatever, and so whatever it is that you choose to do,
Yeah.
wonderful, right? And there are
Yeah,
lots of different ways to do it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Eh, do
Let's
you
do
want me to
step
read
12.
step 12? Hopefully, I'll read it right.
I
Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I haven't memorized them the way you have.
yeah.
Um, this is loaded. Maybe you could,
Sure,
it's a
sure.
loaded
So
message.
it is. And in the addict alcoholic rooms, there's just the added tried to carry this message to other alcoholics or other addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I know we're talking about Al-Anon. So I just, that why I was and why I get picky about the language, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. And so the thing here is I know someone who was raised religious, sort of is religious, although never really had a proper relationship with God or the concept of a higher power. And this person's on their journey. And we were talking, you find God through the work, and that's it. So, as the result, if you do these things and you practice these things and you put the work in, the result of that is the spiritual experience. And that's so important in my opinion. And then, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry the message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And the notion that we can't keep what we don't freely give away. So
Right,
part of step 12 is giving back, right, to
right,
the program and to others.
right,
And that's the sponsorship or just service in the group or whatever, or helping people along your way, which I think is associated to the living amends idea. Um, and to practice these principles in all of our affairs, which is also sort of step 10-ish, is in some of the AA literature, and I think it works in Al-Anon too, or anything, is we have no choice in a sense. We must live this spiritual life, because if we do not, we
right,
suffer and we get sick again and we get ill and all the patterns come back and you just go crazy. And it's
right.
a gift in a way, right? We get to live this spiritual life or whatever. And so it is important to give back and to share and to be whatever and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And to me, there's a great comfort in that. There's a little bit of fear and okay, if I accept that responsibility, then I can't fucking no days off kind of idea. Nobody's perfect. Obviously, you have bad days, but I must that guilt that I probably drowned with drugs and alcohol is there, and I must deal with it because I can't drown it out. So I deal with it through the steps. That's my kind of short version of how I understand step 12.
So I think of this as, and I think they talk about the word, I like the word transformation, right? That this is where, you were willing to change, you were willing to see the reality, you were willing to accept what you couldn't see, what you were in denial with. You were willing to work with others. You were willing to have a spiritual awakening. You were opening up your heart and your soul to change and to change yourself. And as hard as that might have been, that all of a sudden now you're starting to transform. But what I like about it is that it continues to say that this is a lifelong journey, that life is a journey, and that it's a continual work in progress. So, in order to, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to mess up and you're going to have to apologize and you're going to have to keep on trying better and you're going to have to look harder at some of the realities in your life and maybe be a little more honest as you continue on with your life. And you need that self reflection in order to get transformation.
Mm.
And you need the courage to have a spiritual awakening. And as you said, it's without the spiritual awakening, that's when the spiritual awakening happens, that's where you lose your self will.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you lose your self will, you have a spiritual awakening. People might say, "What are you talking about?" Um,
Yeah, well, so
what?
it's all the things that we just talked about, right? I can't control this person. I don't per se know what's right. I can't stay hiding in fear and avoidance and shame and guilt. I must practice these principles in all my affairs, which means letting go of those shortcomings and defects and fears and having some faith that I'll be okay if I do that,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah, and to trust that the steps are just another version. I heard a wonderful, he's a very famous priest, I guess he is. I don't know. I can't remember his name. He stated that the 12 steps are basically America's spiritual gift to civilization. And I
And
thought that was beautiful.
I
Yeah.
believe so too. I believe that they are a gift, and I wish I had recognized that, 10 years before I started Al-Anon because I needed it then. But I'm just so grateful that I have been able to find the program and I've been able to just work the steps. It's
Mhm,
just
mhm.
work. And a lot of times we're on this treadmill of just doing everything and performing everything and earning money to pay the bills. And we're not recognizing that there's so much more to life than living, just living and living within a consumeristic society. That there's so much more that we need to do to feel better
Yeah.
as human beings. I'm just gonna say this is for anyone who might actually be watching this,
Yeah. Yeah.
who is
Or listening.
deeply or listening,
And there
who
are.
might be different. You may find that you're you're in the worst part of your life, and you're basically trying to get through the day and get through the tonight, get through the evening, get through the day because that's all the energy you have left. Whenever I had a group of people who were newcomers that came to Al Anon, I would always read this at the end of the newcomer meeting. It's called Just for Tonight, and it's a little pamphlet from Al Anon. Just for tonight, I will be grateful. I will give thanks for the past day, its failures as well as its successes, its sadness as well as its joy, and its pain as well as its pleasure. I will take comfort in knowing that every event and circumstance that occurred today can be used for my good and the good of others. Just for tonight, I will accept that I have done the best I could, remembering that my goal is spiritual progress, not perfection. I will let go of any expectation I had for this day, as well as any disappointment, shame, or guilt I felt for not being perfect today. Just for tonight, I will be humble. I will give my shortcomings to a power greater than myself, trusting that doing so can bring about changes in me that I could not bring about myself. Just for tonight, I will not attempt to rectify today's mistakes or solve tomorrow's problems. I will remind myself that I am better able to receive guidance when my mind and body are rested and refreshed. Just for tonight, I will set aside my fears, frustrations, and aspirations and take a few minutes to review the abundance that exists in my life today. I will place my future in the care of a loving God of my own understanding, trusting my needs will be met at a time and in a way that is best for all concerned. Just for tonight, I will release my loved ones to a higher power's care. I will free myself from trying to do the impossible, changing the actions, attitudes, or life of anyone other than myself. Just for tonight, I will set aside anger, judgment, resentment, envy, and hurt feelings. I will ask my higher power to bless those whose actions I feel troubled by and to change my attitude, one of love, acceptance, and compassion. Just for tonight, I will find a safe, comfortable place to lie down and close my eyes. I will remind myself I am both deserving and in need of rest. I will look forward to awakening to a new day, feeling rested and ready to follow my higher power's guidance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It was beautiful. Okay, I guess it's probably a good way to stop talking.
Right.
We've been talking for an hour and 45 minutes somehow, which is amazing. So thank you so much, Jennifer. Yeah.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for letting me, thank you for caring and being willing to suggest that I try Al-Anon. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for listening to the State of Mind podcast. Before you go, please pick one idea from today's episode and try to practice it this week. Remember, live with courage, clarity, and compassion. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it, comment on it, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating in any of those podcast apps, and please share it with someone who you think might find it helpful. I wish you all the very best. Take it easy. Peace out.